It began as a fleeting thought, a momentary weakness that spiraled into something far greater than I ever anticipated. I still remember the first time I felt the pang of betrayal in my own heart towards someone who trusted me implicitly. Her name is Emily, my wife of 7 years, a woman who stood by me through thick and thin, who gave me love, kindness, and unwavering loyalty. But somehow I allowed myself to falter. It wasn't planned. These things rarely are. It started with innocent conversations at work, a camaraderie with a colleague named Sophie, the laughter we shared over coffee breaks, the small compliments exchanged. They seemed harmless. But deep down, I knew I was treading dangerous ground. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when the line was crossed. Maybe it was when I started staying late at work under the guise of deadlines, or when I found myself checking my phone obsessively for her messages. What I do know is that each step I took down that road felt heavier, laden with guilt that gnawed at me relentlessly. Emily would ask me how my day went, and I'd smile, offering vague answers, knowing full well I was withholding the truth. The weight of those lies was unbearable, but I couldn't stop myself. What started as casual conversations turned into stolen moments. Lunch breaks extended into long drives, and soon we found excuses to meet outside of work. Sophie was everything Emily wasn't, spontaneous, flirtatious, and uninhibited. It was intoxicating, the way she made me feel like a younger, freer version of myself. But with every meeting, I felt myself slipping further away from the man I used to be. Emily began to notice the change in me. "You've been distracted lately," she said one night as we sat across the dinner table. I shrugged it off, muttering something about stress at work. Her eyes searched mine, and for a fleeting moment I thought she knew. But she didn't press further, trusting me as she always had. Her trust only deepened my shame. I wanted to stop. I told myself I would, but the pull of Sophie's attention was too strong. The guilt became unbearable. I began to lose sleep, my dreams haunted by the look of betrayal I imagined on Emily's face. Yet I couldn't bring myself to end things with Sophie. There was a thrill in our secret, a twisted sense of freedom that I craved. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and mine was no exception. One evening, Emily found a receipt in my jacket pocket, a dinner for two at a restaurant we'd never been to. "Who did you have dinner with?" she asked, her voice trembling. My heart raced as I stumbled over my words, trying to fabricate a story. But the look in her eyes told me she didn't believe me. That was the moment I realized the damage I'd done was irreversible. There's a kind of silence that screams louder than any argument, and that's exactly what filled the room after Emily's question. I couldn't look her in the eyes. My mind scrambled for a believable excuse, but every possible explanation felt hollow. She waited, her arms crossed, her face a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. I finally muttered something about meeting a colleague for work-related discussions, but even as the words left my mouth, they felt weak and insincere. She didn't buy it. "You're lying," she said, her voice cracking. "I've felt it for weeks now, this distance, your secrecy. I just didn't want to believe it." Her words cut through me like a knife. I wanted to come clean, to tell her everything and beg for forgiveness. But fear held me back. I didn't want to face the consequences of my actions, so I remained silent, letting her suspicions fester. That night, she slept in the guest room, leaving me alone with my guilt. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over again. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out, and I knew it would destroy everything we had built together. As things fell apart at home, my meetings with Sophie became more frequent. I leaned on her, seeking comfort in the one place I knew I shouldn't. She listened to my frustrations, offered me understanding, and for a brief moment, made me feel like I wasn't the villain in my own story. But even in those moments, there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind, reminding me of the damage I was doing. Sophie started asking questions too. "What's going on with you and Emily?" she asked one evening as we sat in her car. I could see the concern in her eyes, but I could also sense something else. Doubt. She wasn't blind to the mess I was creating, and I think part of her knew this wouldn't end well for either of us. But she didn't press further, and I didn't volunteer the truth. It was easier to live in denial, even as the walls of my life began to close in around me. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply you try to bury it. Emily found out everything. I came home one evening to find her sitting on the couch, her laptop open, her face pale. She had seen the messages, flirty texts, pictures, plans to meet. My heart sank as she turned the screen towards me, her hands shaking. "I trusted you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The pain in her eyes was unbearable. I tried to explain, to apologize, but every word I said felt hollow. She didn't yell or scream, she just sat there, tears streaming down her face. "Do you even love me anymore?" she asked. That question broke me. Of course I loved her, but my actions had betrayed that love in the worst way possible. That night, she packed a bag and left. I didn't stop her because I knew I didn't have the right to. I sat alone in our empty home, surrounded by memories of what we once had, wondering how I had let it all fall apart. The silence in the house was deafening after Emily left. I wandered from room to room, her absence echoing in every corner. I looked at the photographs on the walls, the souvenirs from vacations we had taken together, and the little notes she used to leave me on the fridge. Each one felt like a relic from a life I had destroyed. The weight of my choices pressed down on me like never before. I tried to distract myself, work, television, even cleaning the house, but nothing could drown out the guilt that consumed me. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake I had made. The messages to Sophie, the lies I had told Emily, the excuses I had given myself, it all played in a loop like a cruel film I couldn't escape. Eventually, I stopped answering Sophie's calls. It wasn't her fault, but being around her only reminded me of how much I had lost. I didn't have the courage to end things properly with her, so I let the relationship fade away, leaving another wound in its wake. One day, while cleaning out a drawer, I found a letter Emily had written to me years ago. It was from our first anniversary. She had written about how much she loved me, how she believed in us, and how she couldn't wait to grow old together. Reading her words felt like a punch to the gut. I realized then just how deeply I had betrayed her trust and our relationship. That letter forced me to confront myself in a way I hadn't before. I had spent so much time feeling sorry for myself, wallowing in guilt, but I hadn't done anything to make amends. I needed to own up to my actions, not just to Emily, but to myself. It wasn't just about saying sorry, it was about understanding the pain I had caused and making a commitment to never repeat those mistakes. It took me weeks to gather the courage to reach out to Emily. I didn't expect her to forgive me, I didn't think I deserved it, but I needed her to know that I was truly sorry. I called her one evening, my hands trembling as I held the phone. When she answered, her voice was calm but distant. I told her everything. I admitted to the lies, the betrayal, and the excuses I had made to justify my actions. I told her how much I regretted what I had done and how deeply I missed her. She listened quietly, and when I was done, there was a long silence. Finally, she said, "I appreciate you telling me this, but I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Her words were like a knife to the heart, but I understood. Trust isn't something you can demand, it's something you earn. I told her I didn't expect anything from her, but I was committed to becoming a better person, whether or not she chose to give me another chance. Emily didn't come back, and I didn't expect her to. But making that call was the first step in a long journey of self-reflection and growth. I started going to therapy, confronting the insecurities and flaws that had led me to make such terrible choices. It wasn't easy. Facing your own failures never is. Over time, I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I focused on my work, spent more time with family and friends, and tried to become the kind of person Emily had once believed in. I still think about her every day, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for what I did. But I've learned that growth comes from owning your mistakes and working to ensure they never happen again. As time went on, I found myself reflecting deeply on what love truly means. I had mistaken it for comfort, for routine, for something that could endure anything without effort. But I learned the hard way that love requires constant care, honesty, and vulnerability. It's not about perfection. It's about being willing to grow together, to face challenges head-on rather than hiding from them. There are days when the memories come flooding back, a song on the radio, a scent that reminds me of her, or a place we once visited together. Those moments are bittersweet. They remind me of what I had and what I lost. But they also push me to be better, to never take love for granted again, to never repeat the mistakes that cost me so much. I don't know if Emily and I were meant to last forever. Maybe we weren't. But I do know that she deserved better than what I gave her, and for that, I'll always be sorry. Healing isn't linear. There are days when I feel strong, like I'm finally putting the pieces of my life back together. And then there are days when the weight of my mistakes threatens to pull me under again. But I've learned to take it one step at a time, to forgive myself, even if it's just a little, and to remember that growth comes from struggle. I've started to find joy in small things again. A good book, a walk in the park, a conversation with an old friend. These moments remind me that life goes on, even after heartbreak. They remind me that while I can't change the past, I can shape the future. I've also learned to be more honest, with myself and with others. It's not easy to admit your flaws, but I've found that vulnerability is the foundation of real connection. I've started building relationships that are based on trust and authenticity, and for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about what lies ahead. One evening, I sat down to write a letter to Emily. I knew I would never send it. It wasn't about asking for forgiveness or trying to win her back. It was about closure, about expressing everything I had kept bottled up inside. I wrote about the good times, about the laughter and love we shared. I thanked her for the memories, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, and I apologized, deeply, sincerely, for the pain I had caused. Writing that letter felt like a release, like I was finally letting go of the guilt and shame that had haunted me for so long. I folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer. It was my way of saying goodbye to a chapter of my life that had shaped me in ways I couldn't have imagined. To anyone listening to this, I want you to know that mistakes don't define you. It's how you choose to move forward that matters. Own your actions, take responsibility, and strive to be better, not for anyone else, but for yourself. We all carry regrets, but they don't have to weigh us down forever. They can be lessons, reminders of our capacity to grow and change. And while we can't undo the past, we can always work toward a better future. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but I hope it serves as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's always a path forward.